Lord Pustus the Vile, a malignant plaguecaster, a powerful sorcerer of the warp. Wielding his corrupted staff, he chants droning choruses to summon noxious fumes, toxic to all who dare to breathe. These fumes rot the flesh of mortals, corrode metal, and materialize into horrifying maggots and plague flies. He is the bringer of rot and corruption, and today I'm going to show you how to paint Pustus the Vile. Before you start painting, you're going to want to prime your model. For this guy, I use Stynylrez black. After that, the first step is to begin blocking in colors on different sections of the model. I started with the armor here, and for this, I'm using Deathguard green. 2 thin coats is the name of the game. I'm using a paint consistency that is slightly thinned down compared to how the paint comes out of the bottle. Now on this step, you want to make sure you let the first coat completely dry before you apply the second coat, and this is going to give you that nice solid green base coat. After those layers dry, you should have a nice cohesive green layer over all of the armor panels. The next color to block in is bronze, and this color is Balthazar gold, and I'm applying this to all the trim sections on this model. I'm watering this paint down a little bit so it flows off the brush nice and easy, and if you make mistakes during this step, they are pretty easy to fix because we haven't applied our wash yet. I was pretty surprised that this guy was a named character. I did a little bit of research on him, and I wasn't able to find too much lore about him besides one small paragraph, but even so, I think it's really cool that this is a guy you can play on the tabletop just as a Malignant Plaguecaster. I think that's fine. He doesn't necessarily need his own datasheet. After painting the trim, I used Pallid witch flesh to block in his face, belly, and tassels. This paint is a nice off-white color that has pretty strong pigmentation. It pairs well with washes like Druchi Violet, Agrax Earthshade, or pretty much whatever wash you want to use. In this video, I use this paint quite a bit, mainly to desaturate colors and brighten them up for subsequent layers. After blocking in the colors, it's now time to stinkify your Plague Marine. Basically what this is, you just take Agrax Earthshade and apply this all over the armor. I'm not applying this to the skin tone in the face area because I'm going to use different colors there, which is fine. But you might have noticed I like to base coat as many things as possible before applying a wash. And the reason for this is because once you apply the wash, fixing any mistakes that come after that step can be a little bit tedious because you have to repaint and then reshade. But yeah, other than that, this is a very good method. It's quick and easy, and I think it's quite simple. After shading in the armor, I wanted to paint the areas that would be the most difficult for me to reach because I'm not sub-assembling this model. The first area I painted was his belly, and I used 2 coats of wash for this. The first one, I mixed red and Druchi Violet to create a magenta color and applied this. I let that dry a little bit, and then I applied some more Druchi Violet. I didn't mix it with red this time so that it would be extra dark, and I applied this in the most recessed areas in this section. To paint his face, I used 3 colors: Pallid witch flesh, flat brown, and purple. I mixed these 3 together to create a dark, desaturated purple skin tone and used this as the starting point for the face on the skin. After the base coat, it's time to layer up. For each layer, I mix in Pallid witch flesh into my existing skin tone and then applied this to target areas on the face, specifically his large nose, his chin, his lips, his cheeks, his eyebrows. These are all the types of areas that you're going to want to focus when painting faces using this method. I repeated this layering step 2 more times, and both of those times I mixed in more Pallid witch flesh into the layer to get brighter and brighter. Now, Lord Pustus the Vile comes with 2 head options. He has this face, and then he has a face with chainmail covering down to his chin. Now, the chainmail face looks really cool. It looks pretty metal, but I think that this face has a little bit more character. You know, he has this frown and he has this look like he just smelled a really stinky fart, which I think is perfectly in line with Deathguard. And overall, the face just looks really sinister, really evil. He looks like a malignant plaguecaster, or what one should look like. Let me know in the comment sections about what you think about face options for Deathguard. Do you like painting them? Do you avoid them? Are you scared to paint them? I know I used to be afraid to paint them. But anyways, to wrap this section up, I highlighted his stomach section with the white color, and then I used a needle brush to add some Druchi violet to the darkest recesses on his face. And look at that handsome face. He really looks like a guy who's about to conjure up some toxic fumes. Moving on to the armor, I just took Deathguard green here and layer painted this onto the main armor sections. What you'll see here is that I'm being very careful to avoid areas that butt up against any sort of trim. This leaves that dark recess shading in the crack and creates a nice look. And as you can see here, my first layer of paint on this set doesn't have the best coverage. So what I do is I paint this on, I let it dry, and then I apply a second layer or third layer even in the sections where I want the armor to be brightest. I'm intentionally leaving some dark spots in the armor just to create some interest, you know, so you're not just looking at flat armor panels. After layer painting the entire armor, I then took lemon yellow and mixed this in with Deathguard green to create my second layer. And what I'm going for here is a pretty yellow green. I want the armor to have this yellowish look. And what I'm doing here is I'm using a paint that is a glaze consistency, and I'm pushing the paint pigments to the section on the armor where I want it to be the brightest. For the wings on his back, I'm using a similar method. I'm applying thin layers of paint one at a time to slowly build up the color. This creates a nice gradient from the dark shadows to the bright sections on the wings. Something I love about Deathguard models is that they all have unique backpacks. If you buy a Space Marine set, all the Space Marines have the same backpacks, but Plague Marines and these guys here, no, they don't have that. I mean, look at this guy. He has wings on his backpack. They didn't have to add this, but they did. For the final layer, I mixed in Pallid witch flesh to my already existing yellow-green paint, and I used this to edge highlight the model. On these areas, it's more of a traditional edge highlight. I'm focusing on all of the most raised areas on the armor and just trying to build up the shape of the model. On this model, I was going for more of a subtle edge highlight. I wasn't trying to edge highlight every single panel of armor, and that's because he's got a lot going on. He's got flies, he's got toxic fumes, he has a really cool looking staff, he's got maggots everywhere, he's got tassels. There's so many details on this model, so when looking at him, I didn't really want the armor to be too crazy. I mean, I wanted it to look good, but I didn't want it to stand out too much and overpower everything. Now, something else here is that I don't just edge highlight, I also spot highlight, and you can see that here on his backpack. After you finish, the armor should look something like this. This method of painting does take more time, but I think it does produce good results, and it's pretty rewarding. This model has two cloth areas that took me a while to decide on what color I wanted to paint them. Ultimately, I decided on a reddish magenta color. I was going for a color that was similar to the background color on Deathguard box art. So I created that color by mixing purple and red, and I used this to base coat these sections, and that is the hood and his loincloth. You might have seen this coming, but I mixed in Pallid witch flesh into my existing mixture to create a highlight layer. I spent some time on this section doing some blends as well by creating slightly darker colors and then adding this to all the sections where the light area touches the dark. On sections like this, I always try to pick a more desaturated color. That way it doesn't conflict with the main sections on the model, like the green on the armor. For the long tassels on his armor, I mixed in skin tone with Agrax Earthshade to create a tan color, and I used this to wash these tassels. And then after that, I just highlighted the ridged areas or the raised areas with a little bit of Pallid witch flesh. Now, if you know what these things are, please let me know, because I think they kind of look like anti-purity seals or something along those lines. Overall, they add a lot of character to this model and they look pretty cool. At this point, I turned my attention to the trim, so I revisited areas that I didn't paint and I touched up certain surfaces where I had spillover from the previous steps. I then took Auric armor, which is a really yellow gold from Citadel, and then I used this to edge highlight certain sections on the bronze trim, like his wings and his shoulder plates. In the past, I probably would have used a more silver color to highlight these sections, but on this guy, I wanted to try out using a yellow gold. For the final touches on the bronze trim, I took Bharroth blue, watered it down, and applied this in all of the divots in the armor and around some of the bolts. This creates an oxidized look to the armor and looks really classic. Before moving on to his corrupted staff, I had to paint all the maggots on the model, and this guy, he could have been called the Maggot Lord rather than Lord Pustus, because he has so many maggots on this model. They're pretty easy to miss. But anyways, I used Pallid witch flesh, and then after that dried, I just applied a quick wash of Agrax Earthshade. After painting a whole colony of maggots, I then blacked in the pipes on his backpack and these things on the backs of his legs. After finishing that, I went on to paint his corrupted staff. For the base coat, I just used flat brown and painted this all over the staff. You can see here for his handle, I painted that with a magenta color that I got by mixing red and purple. Ultimately, I just wanted to keep it simple here. I only used one layer of highlights using a lighter color of brown, and I painted this on all of the raised areas on the staff. For these highlights, I'm using a pretty thin layer of paint, and I'm just focusing on catching the edges of the staff. I think the staff head is super detailed, so it kind of speaks for itself. I also painted the toxic emitters with Balthazar gold and the maggots in those toxic emitters as well. For the toxic fumes, I went back and forth with color choice. I initially base coated them with moot green with the intention of making this look like green fire or some sort of fell magic. But after reading the lore, I read about how he summons toxic fumes. Now, when I think of toxic fumes, I don't necessarily think of green fire. So because of that, I changed my mind, and then I ended up base coating these with a dark blue gray. Before painting in the highlights, I had to black in all of the flies, paint the wings white, and then paint the maggots in these toxic fumes. At first, I didn't see these until I started looking closer, and this step took a lot of time. It was really tedious, and at this point, I kind of realized, like, if I had painted this green, I probably wouldn't have had to do this, but in the end, I'm very happy that I decided to paint them like this. For his maggoty little friends, I gave them a bath in Agrax Earthshade. I did not apply this to the wings on the flies to keep them more white. To highlight the toxic fumes, I applied 2 layers. The first layer, I just used pure azure blue. This is more of a sky blue color, and I just applied this to all the raised areas all over the toxic fumes. After that, I mixed azure blue with moot green to create a bluish green color, and then I applied this to the tips of these toxic fumes to give them more of a magic look. So I ended up using green anyways, but I think that this green is not an overpowering green. It just adds that subtle touch to these fumes. After that, I then highlighted all of the flies with a gray color, dotted their eyes with a red color to make them look really sinister, and then I washed their wings in this bluish wash that I created by watering down my light blue paint. For the final touches on the model, I painted the base using a dark brown color that looks a little bit like mud. And then I painted the slug thing on the bottom of his base with the Pallid witch flesh, and I washed it with Druchi violet. And then of course I painted all of the maggots on the base. And that is how you paint Lord Pustus the Vile. This model has so much detail and the pose is just so cool. He's a named character that can be played in both Kill Team and the tabletop as a Malignant Plaguecaster. If you're thinking about picking up this guy, I would highly recommend just getting the Kill Team set, as buying him individual is a little overpriced in my opinion. I hope that you were encouraged by this video to go and paint some awesome looking models, even if they're not Deathguard. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.